Hola. Hey, this is Max Keiser. You know, the hottest Telegram group right now is t.me/Keiser Spanish. They are crushing it. Oh my God. Stacy.
Yes, they are crushing it. So go over to Telegram, t.me/Keiser Spanish. It is a hot, caliente place to be, right?
Oh, it's caliente, all right. I can tell you that for sure.
You know, speaking of caliente, we are heading to El Salvador. So the next episode of Keiser Report will come to you from El Salvador.
I got my El Salvador flag right here.
Oh, yes. So we're going to go there to look at hyper-Bitcoinization right in the eyes. We're going to...
How dramatic.
Stare it down.
Hyper-Bitcoinization in a time of hyperinflation. It's funny how those two things seem to be going together.
Right. We're going to stare it down. But in the meantime, we're going to show you some economic lessons, hard economic lessons, right in the headlines as we were preparing to leave. And first is, you know, this did the rounds of the Bitcoin community, and it's from Canada. Bitcoin is not a digital currency. People don't spend it, said Bank of Canada governor. He said this as if it were a bad thing, not as if it were a bad thing about him, but about other people and about Bitcoin. So I think it was a statement that was very profound, telling the world, admitting to the world that he himself and other central bankers are the ones that are causing this, i.e., Gresham's law. I'm going to show you what Gresham's law is. In economics, Gresham's law is a monetary principle stating that bad money drives out good. For example, if there are two forms of commodity money in circulation which are accepted by law as having similar face value, the more valuable commodity will gradually disappear from circulation. In this case, the good money, Bitcoin, the bad money, the Canadian dollar. Are you going to spend your bad money that you want is, as we know, inflation is running at over 6%. Do you want to get rid of that? Or do you want to get your deflationary currency that's going up in value, not the one declining in value? Well, you try to get rid of the one declining in value, right? So that's why it's not used as a currency, right? That's why it's a store of value. And your currency that you're printing is the one people are choosing to spend.
Yeah. There's that. Plus, people are using Bitcoin in transactions, billions and billions of dollars worth every day. So there was a time when academics and central bankers and folks, when they got flamed back, trolled by Bitcoiners on social media, it was a sign of some kind of badge of honor. Like, aha, you know, those silly Bitcoiners trolled me on social media. But now I think it's safe to say that this gentleman is just stupid. I mean, he's just functionally stupid. That however he got into the position that he got into, he's Canadian, so I assume he got hit in the head with some hockey pucks, and that made him eminently qualified to be in his current job.
Hockey aside, there is another interesting story, because hockey is quite interesting, to tell you the truth. Our team is doing pretty well this year, the Carolina Hurricanes. And what I want to say is that, so we have Gresham's law. We have this contradiction in his terms at the top where he's saying, like, Bitcoin's not being used as a currency. You're not buying a pair of socks. You're not buying your coffee with it. You're not, unless you have to transfer billions of dollars from El Salvador to, say, Hong Kong, you don't need to use it right now because you have bad money you can spend. Sure, you can spend your good money if you want, but the instinct of most consumers within the economy is going to be, by nature, to get rid of their bad money while somebody is willing to still take it. So there you have that. Now we move to the other story that Max and I picked up on first, and that was during COP26 with Joe Biden and his new infrastructure plan and his new other plans and budgets and spending and all this sort of like plans to save the world, they say. Well, you know, they're going to save the world by reducing carbon emissions, but first, by increasing carbon emissions. Rising oil prices put Biden in a bind over climate pledges. White House mulls its limited options to boost supply. Critics say situation exposes flaws in president's climate change agenda set out at COP26. His administration's ambitious agenda to stem global warming calls for a shift away from fossil fuels, yet Mr. Biden is now urging the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries to increase production to ease shortages wages and lower prices.
Well, this is the attitude of the alcoholic who says, I'm going to stop drinking tomorrow. I just need one drink today to get me through. Or the drug addict or any other person that's, America's addicted to oil. America's not going to solve their carbon emissions problems by Joe Biden's plan of increasing oil output. So he's obviously not fit for purpose. He's not fit to be, to run a hot dog stand at this point, much less be the president of the United States. He makes no sense. The problem with all the greenhouse gas carbon emissions initiatives that rely on, rare earths, for example, or cobalt, it just means they're increasing child slavery in the countries that produce these rare earths and cobalt. They haven't thought that through. That's just the beginning. It's such a silly, it's so silly.
Well, Max, is beyond that. It's just simple, basic economics, right? Here we have the allegedly richest country in history with the allegedly richest consumer in history. And yet even this small increase in prices of oil prices, and our energy prices are a lot cheaper than Europe, for example. And this is causing the president to want to alter, at least for now, we need to reduce the cost of oil and energy for our consumers. Well, think about the practicality of any of these global carbon reduction programs, where they're calling on the poorest people in the world, the bottom 7.5 billion people, to pay higher energy prices. Energy is an important input into growth, into economic activity since the beginning of time, before we even wrote the very first economics textbook. It was a basic ingredient of all economic growth. So it's just, it just exposes the lie of this pretend situation that we were going to do something about.
Right.
This.
Meanwhile, mining Bitcoin use energy and reduces carbon footprint. El Salvador, we have a real life example. Their energy usage is going up dramatically while their carbon footprint is collapsing. It's going down because Bitcoin's swapping out fiat money, which is incredibly energy inefficient. First of all, you have to back by the Pentagon and the military industrial complex and all that. So this is the way. But Biden, he hasn't had a sentient thought in 30 years.
Well, he is, or his party is up for re-election and the midterms coming up. And that is part of the reason why we're seeing this, because OPEC has so far rebuffed the U.S. appeals to increase output. They haven't done it. And with gasoline and heating oil prices at their highest levels since 2014, Americans are expressing unease over the administration's economic policies as next year's midterm elections loom. Quote, high prices tend to usher out incumbent politicians faster than they usher in new technologies, i.e. the new technologies that might help reduce the cost of oil or reduce the cost of energy using solar, using wind, using geothermal and other options for Americans.
Right. Well, prices for gas is going to be up dramatically by the time the elections, because Biden hasn't addressed the true cause of this calamity, and that is the excessive money printing. And they're scheduled now to double the money supply, the M2 money supply again over the next 12 months. They doubled it over the previous 12 months. They're going to double it again. So gas is going to $8, $9 a gallon.
Yeah. And of course, the Washington Post tried to publish an opinion piece, which they quickly deleted and scrubbed from the internet because democracy dies in darkness. But the thing is, they wrote a piece along the lines of how we should embrace inflation, that this is good, that it will reduce our consumption. And of course, all the bottom 99% that do not write for the Washington Post or own the Washington Post, they got very upset with this. So the reality is that real people live in a different world from the 1% who rule the world, right? And you see that again in this. So Adidas, as we call it here in America, or Adidas, as they say in the UK, is also in the Wall Street Journal headlines with the same sort of situation that Biden finds himself in, with what he says. He wants carbon emissions reduced. With what happens is that he needs to reduce the cost of oil, so we need to pump more. Adidas takes hit from boycott in China. Once seen as growth engine, the sportswear company, along with other Western apparel brands, continues to suffer from a Chinese consumer boycott. Just to put this into context, China is now the largest apparel and sportswear market in the world, the footwear market. Valued at $376 billion in 2021, followed by the United States, which is $330 billion. And importantly, they're still rising. China's still rising, and consumers are only starting to spend on footwear and stuff like that. So already it's like 10% bigger than the US market, and it's getting bigger. But US consumers don't like US listed companies selling goods into China because of what they allege is something happening with the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province. So, China, the companies are having to issue statements condemning China. Well, the Chinese consumers have boycotted these companies. On Wednesday, Adidas reported that its revenue in mainland China, Taiwan, and Hong Kong fell 15% in the third quarter, after dropping by 16% in the second quarter. Adidas was hit by a consumer boycott that began earlier this year after the company, as part of a consortium of Western brands, raised concerns about forced labor allegations in China's Xinjiang region.
As I've been saying, as the inflation genie comes out of the bottle, the language and the rhetoric from mainstream media, financial press will get more pretzel, crazy, loopy-loop, nutso. And so we're seeing that. People are just saying black is white, up is down, to describe inflation, because they don't understand it's based on money printing. It has nothing to do with what they think it has to do with. So they sound like complete idiots by definition, because they're talking about things with the complete wrong basis for their proclamations. The thing about China, again, what I've been saying for a number of years is, at some point, that whole soft power that was a part of America with the brands and Hollywood, that'll fade away, and then China will have its own brands and its own film industry, and that'll be the soft power that China will project around the world with cultural export, the same way the U.S. has been doing that since World War II. It'll be a Chinese export of their cultural goods and intellectual property. They're already on G5 and G6 in terms of telecommunications, way ahead of everyone else, including the U.S. And the U.S. is completely stuck in the mud and trailing behind a guy who can't, chew gum and chew gum. Okay, I'm going to take a break. And when we come back, much more coming your way. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Robert Breedlove. He is over at the What Is Money show. Robert, welcome.
Thanks, Max. Glad to be here.
All righty, let's get right into it. By the way, I should mention we are in Miami. A couple of Bitcoin conferences you're speaking at. Highly in demand, Robert Breedlove, after a series of excellent essays. You can find them online. They're really philosophical, but in a way that's very Bitcoin-centric. Now, let me ask you this. If you had only 1 or 2 minutes to describe it, what is money, what's not money, and how do people get mistaken by this? And only 2 minutes. Go ahead, Robert. Listen.
No pressure.
Yeah.
So I think with money, one of my favorite descriptions of it is that it's a contract with the future, or a contract with time. So we all know that we go to work and sacrifice our time for money. And then that is essentially a social construct that we can then take and go and redeem time from others. And without this intertemporal contract, like between ourselves and our future selves and future others, there's no civilization, right? Like, we either trade and cooperate, or we fight over all the wealth that's available. So there's a lot of definitions to this, by the way. I've written out like 50 different answers to that question, so I never know which one to pick. So there's
right.
one.
So in summary, you're able to take the work that you did today into the future.
That's right.
Use it for exchange, for something in the future. Now, the U.S. dollar, let's talk about that for a second. Inflation is officially at 6.2%. Some of the corporate media are saying that we should celebrate inflation. I see this a lot in the mainstream media. Is inflation a good thing? Your thoughts?
No, I saw a headline in one of the magazines today saying, quote, "Inflation is good for you." And the equivalent translation of that is, stealing from you is good for you. It doesn't make any sense at all. And I think this mass this mass deception that's being pushed on us is pushing society towards a mass psychosis, actually. Because how can people understand what's going on when people don't understand money? They don't understand the lies they're being told. But I mean, the bottom line of inflation is that it is only theft. It's not even my opinion. It's just mechanically how it works. One good analogy here is maybe like a stock certificate. You would never give one shareholder class the ability to print shares and dilute everyone else. You would never have that.
Ad infinitum.
Ad infinitum, because it's just not fair, right? The class that could print shares would be stealing from those that could not. Yet that's exactly what money is, right? Money is a title to global capital in the same way a stock certificate is title to company capital.
Fiat money.
Fiat money. And when one group can print it, a central bank, they're just stealing from everyone else that's forced to use it.
All right, now one of your essays I mentioned at the top of the show that are really, I thought was something I read 2 or 3 times. It was really great. Bitcoin and the number 0. For the global audience watching out there, give them your thesis on how Bitcoin is as important as the discovery of 0. You know, people are watching the show for a while. We've compared it to fire. We've compared it to Copernicus. But you're comparing it to the number 0 in a brilliant way. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I'll try to, it's like a 40-minute essay, so I can't get it all into one shot here. But the gist of it was, the impetus to write it was people asking me the question, what makes Bitcoin different than all the other crypto assets? And to understand that, you really have to understand the idea of an unstoppable idea. And if you study the history of 0, I think it gives a great narrative of an unstoppable idea, frankly. So we had all these competing mathematics systems across the world, but once the Hindu-Arabic numeral system emerged, which was a 0-based numeral system, it outcompeted all the others. And now we all use a 0-based numeral system because it was more economically efficient, basically. People adopt it because it's more useful. And so Bitcoin, in a rough analogy, is essentially that. It's just an idea. It's the only money with 0% terminal inflation in history, so it has no theft in it. So everyone is going to voluntarily adopt it. Like if you like wealth and you don't like being stolen from, you would adopt Bitcoin.
Of course, we're looking for Bitcoin to flip gold at some point, which is roughly $9 to $10 market cap. Some suggest that Bitcoin could flip the global bond market because the bond market is now showing a lot of negative interest rate bonds. Bond rates are at all-time low. Bond market's starting to look like the 40-year bull market in bonds is ready to reverse itself. That's a global $200 trillion market. Robert, is that in the cards, do you think?
Yeah, I do. I think we're getting back to, gold was store value for the past 5,000 years, but when governments entered the scene, they were able to actually, largely through their holding of gold, they can impose their debt as the new store value under the lure of yield and other machinations they put in place. But I think the digital age is taking us back towards a purely capitalistic society where you'll have a gold-like asset, which is Bitcoin, serving as the risk-free asset, right?
How are you describing the purely capitalistic society?
Well, I think the digital age just tears down a lot of the barriers to competition. Ideas, the liquidity of ideas is higher than ever. With things like Bitcoin, all of a sudden the individual has a lot more optionality. I don't need to house myself in a certain jurisdiction. I can put my capital in my brain and go anywhere in the world. So I think the digital age is just like throwing fuel on the fire of capitalism.
We're seeing that already. Bitcoin migrants, they're leaving jurisdictions that they don't feel they're treated well in their Bitcoin. They're moving to new jurisdictions, along with the central banks, which look like they're going to be disintermediated by Bitcoin. What about the nation state itself? Is that going to survive Bitcoin?
I don't think in a way that we understand it. It's not, my general thesis kind of matches the Sovereign Individual thesis, an excellent book that I've recommended a lot. I think we go from a world with like 200 nation states to one with like 20,000, just by virtue of separating money and state. So when governments are accountable to the preferences of their customers, they naturally become smaller.
All right, here's a bit of a philosophical question. Is Bitcoin an invention or a discovery?
I think Bitcoin's an invention it's man-made. That seems to be pretty beyond dispute, but I've argued that it led to a discovery, actually, of absolute scarcity for money. Where, again, that 0% terminal inflation rate money is something that can only be discovered once.
Right, so go into that a little bit because this is important when people just talk about so-called competitors to Bitcoin. When you say, it can only be discovered once, what does that mean?
So money is valued based on how large and liquid the network is. So new entrants will always prefer the largest and most liquid network available. So that's how we got to one analog gold, this game theoretic process of people always favoring holding the money that was hardest to inflate. And so I think that same dynamic will play out in the digital world with Bitcoin. And I think it's pretty obvious Bitcoin's already run and won that race, that it is digital gold. It is the premier non-counterparty asset in the digital landscape. So therefore, it's the most trust minimized money we've ever had. So I think it just keeps eating and outcompeting all the other monies in the world. It can't be replicated.
Right, well, we've talked about Bitcoin disintermediating the nation state. Of course, the other side to that would be nation states adopting Bitcoin. And we saw that now with El Salvador, first country in the world to make Bitcoin legal tender. We have a large Latin American audience. Hyper-Bitcoinization has hit Central America. Do you see that spreading in the region, and what does it mean going forward?
You know, I really hope so, and actually, I'm American, so I'm biased, but I see Bitcoin as more American than the US Constitution in many ways, right? Free market capitalism is based on private property rights, rule of law, and honest money. And Bitcoin encapsulates all three of these in a way that a government formational document like the Constitution never could. Because at the end of the day, that's just scribbles on a piece of paper that we can choose to adhere to or ignore. And, you know, as we've seen, politicians start to ignore it over time. That's kind of where we are in the US today. But Bitcoin has taken those principles and permanently emblazoned them in code. So it's put into code in a way that can't be broken or violated. And I think that's really important. You know, it's a new substrate on which to build a nation state, I guess. So, but the nation state that we build on top of it looks a lot different than the large, bureaucratically bloated one that we have today.
Right, and so going forward, give us a preview. What are you working on now?
Yeah, so I'm still writing a sovereignism series. I'm on part 8 of 12 of that. That's on my newsletter that I launched called the Freedom Analects. It's like a Substack newsletter. And I'm working on the What is Money show. So I'm doing a lot of long form series. The next 3 series I'll be releasing are with Eric Weinstein, Jeff Snyder, who's an expert in central banks, and then Jimmy Song, who's a very well-known Bitcoiner. I'm just talking to the smartest people in the world for as long as I can about Bitcoin, money, history, all that stuff.
Where in the world do you think is going to be the easiest to convert over to Bitcoinism?
I'm leaning towards the freedom-loving parts of the country in the U.S. So I'm thinking like, you know, we're in Miami. Miami's looking good. Tennessee,
do you think the U.S. could split along Bitcoin lines? Because obviously Wyoming is very Bitcoin friendly.
Yeah.
Texas, is, and Austin in particular, is a Bitcoin hotspot. The mayor of Miami is a very Bitcoin-centric guy.
Yeah.
Whereas the money printers on the coastal elites, they love government, they love printing money. There seems to be almost, I wouldn't say a civil war, you know, it's a bit dramatic, but it seems like a very an ideological divide. This ship is becoming hardened.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
Yeah, I think it's possible, but my hope would be that we'd figure this out at the U.S. federal level and just start buying Bitcoin, adding it to the treasury, and hopefully by adding incorruptible money under our existing nation state, we could uncorrupt a lot of the bureaucracy we've built over the past 200 years. And I also think that there's a possibility of Bitcoin. The U.S. could use Bitcoin to become the dominant power in the world going into the 22nd century if we played it right. But I'm not sure if we're going to do that. It doesn't seem like people are taking it seriously yet.
Right. You know, I remember back in the early 1960s, you had the Sputnik moment. Russia put up a satellite, and suddenly America entered the space race. It seems now we have a global hash war going on. Countries are starting to mine Bitcoin. Ukraine is starting to get seriously into Bitcoin. This could trigger Russia to respond in kind. And will Russia starting to mine and hoard Bitcoin kind of trigger a modern Sputnik with a global hash war between Russia and America? Who can hoard and mine the most Bitcoin, Robert?
For better or worse, I think that's the type of dynamic it takes. Actually, it takes a competitive escalation to get these countries taking Bitcoin seriously. So I do think that's very likely. I can't see a world where Russia is taking a superior position in Bitcoin mining or Bitcoin holding that the U.S. would not respond to. That doesn't doesn't seem like it would ever work out, which could be, again, a net benefit to both countries.
It seems like there's no bad reason to own Bitcoin. And what I mean is that somebody would say, well, what if central bank buys Bitcoin and they try to dominate it? The answer is, well, go ahead and do it. We want as many central banks in the world to buy as much Bitcoin as possible. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and this is the fundamental thing to understand, is that Bitcoin's the only man-made institution in history that no man can change the rules. So the more central banks, nation states, other bodies of law that adopt it, they actually get integrated to Bitcoin, not the reverse. People are worried about Bitcoin being regulated, but it's actually Bitcoin regulating the existing institutions.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I've discovered is that, I always say you don't change Bitcoin, Bitcoin changes you.
Exactly.
People start buying it, they own it, and before they know it, they are the ones being changed.
Yes.
Robert, thanks so much for being on Keiser Report.
Yeah, man, glad to be here.
All righty. That's going to do it for this edition of Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank our guest, Robert Breedlove of the What Is Money Show. Check it out. And also remember to join our Telegram group at t.me/Keiser Spanish. Until next time, bye, y'all.